This is Spunky
and Snarky,
and we say, welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome back to another episode. We're getting into December, can you believe it? I want this year to be over. I want Christmas to be over, but that's just me. Unfortunately, in December, we have to celebrate extra because it's somebody's birthday. That's right. It's Spunky's birthday week. So we have something extra special for you because my sister is an absolute mystery and safety nerd. We decided to look back on a very special episode of the Bloodhound Gang. 'Cause whenever there's trouble, they're there on the double with the Bloodhound Gang.
'Cause we've got the crime.
We've got the time with the Bloodhound Gang. Truthfully, that's how the theme song goes. Pretty spectacular, I have to say.
Yeah, it's very soulful.
So, let's get into it.
Today we're watching The Bloodhound Gang, the case of the girl from outer space from 321 Contact, Season 2, Episodes 3, 4, and 5. 321 Contact aired on PBS from 1980 to 1988, and the show taught kids scientific stuff.
It also had a great theme, because contact is the answer, is the moment when everything happens. I mean, those PBS shows, they got the theme songs.
They got the jams, yeah. And a segment of this show was The Bloodhound Gang, a series about a group of young detectives who use science to solve crimes and mysteries.
So the Bloodhound Gang is a detective agency that's owned by a very mysterious Mr. Bloodhound. He's kind of like Charlie from Charlie's Angels. You don't really see him. But these three teenagers work for him. You got Vicky, Ricardo, and Skip, and they solve mysteries for a small sum. So this episode starts off with Vicky, and she's hanging around the office, and then the phone rings, and she picks it up. Bloodhound Detective Agency. Whenever there's trouble, we're there on the double. But it turns out to be Ricardo, and she's just kind of bummed because she's bored. So there's nothing really going on, and she's gonna go home when suddenly there's a knock on the door. And it turns out to be Susan Ward, a newspaper reporter who wants to hire the gang. She asks Vicky if she's ever heard of Madam Saturn, and she's like, nope. She explains that her paper has been assigned to do a report on fortune tellers and psychics who might be conning people. So Susan did a bunch of research on Madame Saturn and found out that she used to work at a carnival doing fortunes and is married to an acrobat, one of the 5 jumping Jacksons who do this human pyramid routine. Anyway, they think they're swindling a bunch of people by telling them that they have a house guest from outer space and doing seances, but they think they're up to no good. So she's trying to get into one of her seances, but Madame Saturn saw through her completely and knew she was a reporter and refused to let her in. So that's why Susan wants to hire the Bloodhound Gang to get into the seance and dig up some information. Susan presents Vicky with a diamond ring and, of course, does what any natural teenager would do and scratches it against the mirror to test that it's really a diamond. And sure enough, scratch, scratch, it's real. Susan's like, I rented this from the newspaper, so you better not lose it. Okay, you're gonna trust a teenager with a diamond. So they decide that Vicky's gonna go to the seance, and Susan leaves.
Later that night, Vicky arrives at Madame Saturn's apartment building. She puts the diamond ring on her pinky and goes up the stairs to the second floor and knocks on the door. Madame Saturn opens the door and tells her to get lost. Vicky tells her that she's there for the seance as she flashes her diamond ring at her. Madame Saturn quickly changes her tune and invites her in. So Vicky enters and bumps her head on a hanging chandelier. Madame Saturn says, oh, don't worry, Zancora is always bumping into that too. Vicky's like, who's Sankora? And she says, oh, it's her friend from outer space who is going to join us tonight, as she locks the door behind her. She then introduces Vicky to an older couple, the Bruffs, and another old lady, Mrs. Hooper. Vicky introduces herself to them as Madame Saturn starts to set up for the seance. Mrs. Hooper says that she hopes Sankora will know where her missing poodle Fifi has run off to.
Sankora loves hanging with Mrs. Hooper.
Madame Saturn has everyone gather around the table and has everyone take off their diamonds and put them in a tambourine. She says that extraterrestrials are disturbed by the powerful diamonds. Mr. Bruff said they have a chance to buy a mercury mine and asked if it will be a good investment. Madame Saturn says to trust Sankora as Vicky puts her ring in the tambourine. Madame Saturn then puts a cloth over the tambourine and tells the group to join hands. She says, whatever happens, do not break the chain of hands. Then she calls for Sankora. Madame Saturn's crystal ball blinks and then the rest of the lights dim. We hear noises and she says that she's here, but she's made herself invisible because she's shy.
So shy.
She says, you are here, aren't you? And then the table shakes. She tells Sankora to speak through her lips and tell her what she sees. Sankora, through Madame Saturn, says that the mercury mine will fail. Then she says that she sees a little dog tied to a tree and to go there at the stroke of 10, not a moment before, to the corner of 9th Street in Maine.
Madame Saturn uses this like high-pitched little girl voice when she talks to Sankora. It's like, I see a dog tied to a tree. Regularly she has this Eastern accent like, welcome. It's kind of creepy.
Yeah. She then asks Vicky what her question is, and Vicky says, do you smoke cigars? And then we hear more noises, and then Madame Saturn says, hey, what kind of smart alecky question is that? As the lights come back on, and she says that Vicky made Sankora very angry and that the seance is over. Mrs. Hooper says, do you think Fifi will really be there? And Madame Saturn says that she's sure of it. She takes the cloth off the tambourine, and the diamonds are gone. She says that poor little Sankora took them back to outer space with her because they offended her. Colonel Bruff says that he's going to call the police, but Madame Saturn tells him that the police can't recover anything from outer space. She says that Sankora has played these tricks before. Miss Hooper says that a few weeks ago, Sankora took her diamond bracelet, but she got it back. Madame Saturn says tomorrow they'll hold another seance, and Sankora will return filled with remorse and the jewelry. We'll be back.
Has anybody seen my diamond ring?
She says that there's nothing to worry about. Vicky asks the Colonel if he smokes cigars, and he shakes his head no. And can I just mention that Colonel Bruff is dressed like Colonel Sanders?
Yeah.
He's got the white outfit and the black tie, which I thought was kind of funny because they're both colonels.
So the next day, Vicky's reporting to Susan and tells her what happened. And they're like, something's up, but what is it? Then she remembers about the dog, and she's like, we gotta go see how the dog gets tied to the tree, because only Madame Saturn would know if she'd stolen it in the first place. So she sends Skip to the location to stake out and see who brings the dog or how the dog gets there. Susan then asks about the cigar smoke, and Vicky says, yeah, the room was locked, but somebody was pulling off those tricks, and Ricardo's there, and he asks if all their hands were pinned to the table. Who had Madame Saturn's other hand? He says the Colonel, so he's not involved, clearly, because he was going to call the cops. So something must have happened. There must have been a sixth person in the room. Vicky's sure of it because as soon as the lights went out, that's when she started to smell the cigar smoke. Somebody reeked of it, and she would have noticed they were in the room before. So she thinks the person who was making the table float was the person who smelled the cigars. Somehow he got in and out with the jewelry, even though the door was bolted. Vicky says they should check the window, and Ricardo says, what are you looking for? A human fly who smokes cigars? And it's like, maybe we are. Meanwhile, we see a guy dressed in black. I mean, literally, he could have robbed a bank in a movie and then walked down the street because he looks like a villain, like straight up. And except for the fact that he's walking Fifi. And then he ties the dog to the tree. So Skip is hiding in the bushes and follows the guy to a gym where he was smoking cigars before entering. So Vicky, Ricardo, and Susan head over to Madame Saturn's apartment during the day to check if there's anything outside. Susan suggests that Zencora could have used a ladder to get in, but they don't see any marks. But they notice a set of footprints, but they're like really impressed into the ground. They're like, this guy must have been super heavy that left these footprints. But then they spot another set and a couple other sets. So they're gathering the clues. Then Skip arrives, and we find out that the guy who took the dog's name is Jackson, and he's an acrobat. One of the flying Jacksons. Not to be confused with the Jackson 5, but they do want their dog back. And the jewelry back. Oh, I do now. Ooh, baby. So Ricardo loads up his camera with some fast film to catch these acrobats in the act.
So later that night, Ricardo and Susan are hiding outside with Ricardo's camera ready. She says that if any of the photos come out, her paper will want to use them. And he's like, ooh, I'll get a byline. Skip is watching from the other side as we see 5 men in black go towards the window. They start climbing on top of one another as Skip joins Ricardo and Susan. Here comes the man in black, trying to steal some jewelry. Susan says, what a story, as Ricardo snaps a bunch of pictures of the Jacksons climbing the building. Meanwhile, Vicky is back at Madame Saturn's seance as she calls Zencora again. We hear a noise and then cut back to outside where the other 4 Jacksons are arrested by the police. Back at the seance, Madame Saturn says that Zencora brought the jewelry back and that she's forgiven them. The lights go on and the jewelry is back on the table. We then see one of the Jacksons go outside the window and realize that the other 4 aren't there, so he can't climb down.
The pyramid had crumbled.
Madame Saturn spots him and makes a scene. Vicky says, "May I introduce Zencora?" He runs in and unlocks the door and is arrested by a cop who is waiting outside. Madame Saturn says to remain calm because we have our jewelry back. And Mrs. Hooper says that she got her dog back and that she was exactly where Zencora said she would be. Madame Saturn says that the seance is over. Vicky asks to see one of Mrs. Bruff's earrings, which she gives to her, and she does the old scratcheroo on the mirror trick again, and realizes that it's fake. Diamond scratched glass. The Bruffs are flabbergasted as the cop comes back and says, I guess we got all of them breaking and entering, right? Vicky says, no. Bunko and jewel theft as Skip, Ricardo, and Susan enter. Vicky says, I bet they have a safe deposit box full of the stuff. They've been replacing diamonds with the fakes. She tells the officer that you're going to want to take Madame Saturn with you. And Madame Saturn's like, who, me? And Vicky says, yeah, she's Jackson number 6. Madame Saturn's like, who are these punks? And Susan says, the terrific terrestrials. They're the Bloodhound Gang. Do, 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 do. Always did that ending theme. And then they all smile, and that's the end of the episode. So thoughts on the episode?
It was interesting. It was like short, but they managed to cram in some little like tidbits. I like the acrobat aspect to the show.
Yeah, these were really well-researched mysteries for a kid's show. Because I would have never thought of that.
Yeah, they were like thought out and they had content, but they weren't like overwhelming for kids.
Yeah, and it wasn't talking down to kids. It was using real science, but sneaking it in there without like being super preachy about it. This is my favorite segment of 321 Contact. Like, I liked the other stuff, but as a mystery buff, I like love this segment the most, obviously. Same with, like, Square One, which was about math, but I love the MathNet stuff the best. We'll get some MathNet in the future, hopefully.
I liked it. I thought it was fun. I always pick on the, like, unbelievable stuff, like, yeah, I'm gonna give this teenager a diamond ring and things like that. But for the most part, it was pretty credible.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention that Ricardo, who was in this, he was in The Warriors, which is a great movie. So, you ready to head into the brain basement?
Let's do it.
Alright, welcome to the Brain Basement, where today we're just going to talk about random things, because I didn't pick a topic. I picked this as my birthday episode because I love mysteries, as I've mentioned a bunch of times before. I always read the Nancy Drew books when I was a kid. Still do. I don't give a shit. And I read adult mysteries too. But sometimes I like a light read. And yeah, I always loved the Bloodhound Gang. And it's funny because as we were talking about this, I remember that I tried to do the mirror scratch. I think I found like a ring at like a garage sale or something, and I remember like coming home and getting like a mirror and trying to scratch it to see if it was an actual diamond. It was not. But, you know, that's the kind of thing I took from TV. I would try to do like these things at home. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I would get the Bloodhound Gang book at the library, which you later got me. She likes to hide my Christmas gifts and make me work for it.
It's called a scavenger hunt.
She would make me these coded messages.
You love it, whatever.
I never said I didn't like it. It's pretty fun.
But yeah, the ultimate revenge is the yarn wig.
Which we talked about at our 4th of July episode.
Which was also from a Bloodhound Gang.
I think it was, yeah. It was from some type of spy book. Because when I was a kid, I was always getting those kind of books out of the library, like How to Be a Spy. I remember they had like the one with like the newspaper and you'd have like the hole in it so you could like see through. You could actually spy on people and stuff like that. Even though it was like hella obvious.
Yeah.
I also read like Encyclopedia Brown and like all those types of mysteries that kids read. And I also love mystery adventure games. I'm a big adventure game player, starting with Police Quest. That was my shit back in the day. I still love it. I played all the Nancy Drew games too.
I liked Police Quest as a kid, but I couldn't spell the commands right, so then I stopped playing. Oh, and I couldn't drive straight my, like, rectangle car. I was just too young, so I would just crash it, and then I got, like, disinterested in it.
Well, it's funny because, like, we started playing that game when I was, like, 7. I don't think I actually finished that game until, like, I was, like, 12 or, like, a teenager.
But I specifically remember not being able to spell, like, officer or license or something. And,
I learned how to spell license from that game because I couldn't spell. Yeah, I didn't even know how to type back then, so I was just, like, hunting and pecking.
Not my fault. I couldn't read.
Well, if I was 7 when that game came out, you were, like, 5, so...
Yeah.
But it was still fun times. Back in the DOS days. We're fucking old. I'm especially old.
We all love good times. I think let's get into Spunky's favorite part, the music segment, where she's picked all her favorite jams. The 80s!
Welcome to the Music Spotlight, where today's topic is my favorite songs from 1980.
For all of those listeners that love to hear me sing the songs,
she's not good.
all 0 of them are going to be so disappointed this week because I don't know any of these songs. Sad face.
First on the list is Joe Jackson with Beat Crazy. Yeah, I love Beat Crazy. And yes, this is the English Joe Jackson, not Michael's dad, as Snarky thought.
You never know.
He's the one who did Steppin' Out and Breaking Us in Two.
Crazy. True story.
Yeah, anyways, I really like this song. It's kind of punk and like got a reggae type beat as well. And I love it. Alright, moving on to number 2, OMD, or Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, with Enola Gay. OMD, who are most famously known for the song from Pretty in Pink, If You Leave.
Leave, I won't cry.
But back to Enola Gay. I love this song. They have so many other good songs. Check them out if you don't know their other stuff, because they got a ton of good stuff. And this song, Enola Gay, is actually named after the plane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. But this is a fun little funky new romantic song, and I love it. Number 3 on the list is Roxy Music with Same Old Scene, which is from one of my favorite movies as well, Times Square. And I just love this song. And every time I hear it, I get like chills because it's just so good. And Roxy Music has a bunch of other good songs also. Moving along to number 4 on the list is Ultravox Vienna. And I love this song. I love Midge's voice. He wrote a bunch of good songs, including Do They Know It's Christmas? But we'll talk about that next time. And then, speaking of Midge, that also kind of ties into number 5, which is Visage Fade to Grey, which is another song I also love. And it's funny because Midge from Ultravox was in Visage, and he sings backup on this song. Fade to Grey is a new romantic classic with Steve Strange, who managed the Blitz Club, which was like the new romantic hotspot, where Spandau Ballet was the house band, and Boy George used to work in the cloakroom. It was a cool place for the new romantic scene. And I picked 2 honorable mentions this week. The first one is from one of my favorite bands, Kiss, and it's Shandy. You want to sing this one? Because I know you know it. Shandy, tonight must last us forever. Yeah, I love this song. This is probably one of my favorites. It's a huge hit in Australia. Not so much in the US, but I still love it. And my second honorable mention is kind of a weird one because I'm not really a big country music fan, but I put this on my list because it was number 1 on my birthday when I was born. And it's Kenny Rogers with Lady, and R.I.P. because he died earlier this year. It was written by Lionel Richie, and it's a really good song. I actually really like Kenny Rogers, even though I'm not a country fan. I think my dad had his cassette in the car, one of those ones we'd listen to sometimes on road trips back in the day. But yeah, I do like this song, and anytime he teamed up with Dolly Parton was a good time because she's awesome. Alright, and that's it for our music spotlight. If you want to check out these songs in full, you can check them out on our website.
Thanks for joining us on Spunky's Birthday Spectacular and our adventures with the Bloodhound Gang. We'll get through this Christmas together, and hopefully 2021 will be much better.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Spunky.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next week for one of my Christmas favorites.
Yeah, that should be fun. If you want to drop us a line, you can email us at spunkyandsnarkyshow@gmail.com. You can check us out on our website, which is spunkyandsnarkyshow.wordpress.com. You can leave us a voicemail on our Anchor page, which is anchor.fm/spunkyandsnarkyshow. Or you can get in touch with us or like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all that good stuff. And thanks again for joining us on my birthday extravaganza.
Your birthday. Say it's your birthday.
It's not your birthday too, yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our Christmas spectacular.
All right.
Bye.
Peace.